Good afternoon, everybody, students, staff, faculty, and guests. My name is Dr. Carrie Rodeseiler, and I'm an assistant professor of English here at Indiana Tech. For those of you new to our campus, welcome. We are happy to have you here as we recognize veterans and service members this week leading up to Veterans Day. Before introducing our guests, I'd like to take a moment to share some background on how we all came to be here today. Each year I teach a service learning course called Research Writing, and in this course my students and I interview veterans in the Fort Wayne community. This project, called the Veterans Oral History Project, is in its 4th year now, and my goal in designing it was to provide students with opportunities to research and write about this community, to learn from these men and women, and to forge a relationship with, or at least a better understanding of, people who serve our country. Less than 0.5% of American citizens serve in the armed forces, resulting in what has become known as the knowledge gap between civilians and veterans. So my goal is to narrow that gap by facilitating a project that benefits both students and veterans by providing opportunities for communication and understanding. The goal of today's event is the same, to provide our university and veteran communities with an opportunity to connect. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce our moderator and our panelists. Dr. Scott Liebhauser, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of Online Learning, as well as a retired Air Force veteran, will moderate our conversation. Our first panelist is retired Colonel Doug Schwartz. Mr. Schwartz retired as a colonel after serving for over 34 years in the United States Air Force. As a command pilot, he flew numerous aircraft, including the T-37, T-38, B-52, C-40, and KC-135. He served as a commander at the squadron, group, and wing level in the Air Force. In his last assignment, he served as commander of the 434th Air Refueling Wing, Grissom Air Reserve Base in Indiana. In this position, he was the installation commander and responsible for over 1,900 military and civilian personnel. His military decorations include the Legion of Merit and Air Medal 3 times over. Mr. Schwartz earned his Bachelor of Science from Purdue University and his MBA from Gonzaga University. He also attended the NATO Senior Officer Policy course and the Enterprise Leadership Seminar at the Keenan Flagler School of Business at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Since retirement, Mr. Schwartz has served as a consultant on defense matters, as an interim principal at a Lutheran grade school, and on numerous boards and committees at both the state and regional levels. He lives in Fort Wayne with his wife of 41 years. He has a married daughter with 1 grandson. Our second panelist is veteran Nick Dara. Mr. Dara is a combat veteran of the United States Marine Corps, where he served as an infantry rifleman from 2004 to 2008. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science with a concentration in International Studies and a minor in Spanish, as well as an MBA from the Indiana University, Fort Wayne. He currently serves as the Senior Director of Stakeholder and Government Relations for the Northeast Indiana Regional Partnership, or NEI, a nonprofit economic development organization serving the 11-county region of Northeast Indiana. His primary role is to develop and execute the comprehensive funding strategy of the organization and to build strategic partnerships with relevant stakeholders. Mr. Dara also leads NEI's business development and advocacy activities for the defense and aerospace industry. In addition to his role at the NEI, Mr. Dara serves on multiple boards and committees, including the Northeast Indiana-based Community Council and National Defense Industrial Association, the Greater Indiana Chapter, Northeast Indiana Defense Industry Association, and the United Way of Allen County. Mr. Dara lives in Fort Wayne with his wife and 2 daughters. Please give a round of applause for our moderator and panelists.
Thank you, Dr. Rodeseiler, and thank you for all the work you do to put this together each year with the Veterans Oral History Project. And today's focus is going to be on, well, this is Veterans Day week, so Veterans Day is Saturday, so it's just a fitting time to have this discussion about military leadership. Honored to have you all here. We appreciate your attendance, cabinet, faculty, staff, and our students. Judge Davis, thank you for being with us. Just great to have you all here today. So we have a proud, rich history of military leaders that we can study and we can learn from General Washington to General Grant, General Eisenhower, to our very own General Wayne, to modern day leaders like General Colin Powell and General Schwarzkopf. and so many others throughout history. And the wonderful thing about military leadership is that you learn the great principles through your academies, through your training, but mostly through the school of hard knocks. Things like the battlefield, things like deployment, and all the challenges that go along with military life. That's where we truly learn leadership. It's through the crucible of those hard times. And I think we'll learn a little from these two gentlemen here today. I'm so honored to have Mr. Nick Dara and Colonel Doug Schwartz with us today. This is special for me because we have two very distinct perspectives on leadership. We have an enlisted Marine Corps combat veteran and a wing commander who sent troops to war and has flown and done amazing things at executive leadership level in the Air Force. So it's going to be a great compare and contrast. I have my questions here that we're going to go through, but at the same time, we do have a couple of mics. We don't have to have just a scheduled time. I'll probably ask for questions at different intervals, but perhaps if something piques your interest and you want to throw your hand up, just do that, and those that have the microphones will be watching, and we will make sure to, and if you could just stand up and just share your name with us, what program you're in, so we can kind of know who's speaking to us today. So this is a wonderful event. Any veterans here with us today? If we do have any veterans, if you please stand. Okay, please give a round of applause for our veterans. Thank you for serving. Thank you for your service. So to begin, whoever wants to jump in here first, but I want to set the stage a little bit. So if you could tell us a little bit about your upbringing, the life before military service. So when we do get to learn about you at your military service, what led up to that big decision to join the military? It's not an easy decision to make. You know it's going to be life-changing. So maybe a little bit about your background and then what caused you to make that decision.
Yeah, well, for me, my father served in Korea, and I always had this kind of feeling that everybody should kind of do their service to the country. He never pushed me into it or anything like that. But as I went through my college years, I got more interested in the military, in particular military aviation. One of my best friends was going off to be a Marine pilot. And as they say, one thing kind of led to another, and all of a sudden I saw myself at officer training school and then on to pilot training in the Air Force. But before, how did we get there? I actually grew up here in Fort Wayne, not very far from here, over in Lakeside Park on Edgewater Avenue. Went to Concordia High School, attended Purdue University, and then after graduation I went to Air Force Officer Training School, and then off to be pilot training in the Air Force to fly the B-52. For me, it was more of a sense of duty. I never went in with the intention of making it a career. I wanted to do my 4 or 6 years and go on and do other things in life, but every step of the way there was one more challenge, one more opportunity, one more thing to do. And literally, I joked with my wife, I woke up one morning 34 years and 10 months later, and I was going to retire. I couldn't believe how fast it went. But that's how much I loved it. I joined and I never left.
So I'm a lot kind of the flip side of that coin, honestly. I knew I wanted to be a Marine since I was about 11 or 12 years old. I think every little boy wants to be, at some point, wants to be G.I. Joe, and I just never outgrew that, I don't think. As I got older, I kind of understood the difference between the branches, and I just always looked up to the Marines. Marines are always held up as being the toughest, having the hardest missions, being the least resourced. They have the best uniforms. I mean, hands down, the dress blues of the Marine Corps are way better, and I don't think anybody can really argue that objectively. So I wanted to be a Marine since I was young. I didn't have a tradition of military service in my family. We had some, but not my parents or anything. So no Marines either. So my mom would not sign off on the early enlistment, and we invaded Iraq in 2003. 9/11 happened in 2001. I was graduating high school in 2004. My mom was not very keen on me enlisting in the United States Marine Corps as an infantryman as we had just started 2 wars. So the day after I turned 18, I walked into the recruiter's office and I said, I want to be a Marine, I want to be a grunt, and I want to go as soon as possible. And he said, I can help you with that. And so, yeah. I grew up here in Fort Wayne as well. I grew up on the south side of town. I live on the south side still. Went to Memorial Park Middle School, just down the road. Graduated Southside High School, like I said, in '04, and joined as an enlisted man. I actually had the plan of doing 20 years. That was 18-year-old Nick said, I'm going to join the Marine Corps. I'm going to do that for 20 years. I'm going to retire. I'm at 38, and nobody can tell me different. So after, my recruiter, though, said, take it 4 years at a time and see how it goes. But
I think he deserves a rebuttal. so
Okay, my partner Air Force friend here.
I'll try to be
We'll
unbiased.
go easy on the Marine Corps stuff. No, I have all the respect in the world. I've been in different deployed locations with the Marines, and they always talk about how they're not resourced properly. Here's the inside story, folks. They take things. Now, it's not stealing. They just borrow things, So, for example, one deployed location, we're all intense, right? We're Marines. We had some Army there, Air Force and everything. And, occasionally you'd get a TV and, some tech guy would figure out how we could get a feed of this or that over satellite. I don't know how they did that. Didn't want to know. And all of a sudden, the TVs would disappear. Guess what? We knew where to go. Go to the Marine tent, take them back. Yeah.
it's
Who's
called
gonna stop?
tactical acquisition.
Who's going to stop him? So, all right, very good. So that's a good segue. So Nick brought some slides today. So Colonel and I are going to step aside. He's going to share a little bit about his service overseas.
Yeah, so I'm really going to focus with these slides on, maybe, am I hitting the wrong button?
Big button?
Big button, there we go. On my combat deployment. So I served for 4 years. I joined in, like I said, in 2004. My first deployment was actually to Okinawa, Japan, and we were not in a combat situation there. But in 2006, we got orders as part of the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit to go into Al-Anbar Province, Iraq. And so Al-Anbar Province is kind of in the middle of the country. So to orient you real quick, so a map of Iraq here in the middle, that circle is where we were. And then zooming in a little bit farther, we were in what was called the Haditha Triad area. So Haditha is the kind of bigger clump of buildings, and this is a satellite image. In the middle there, that was the larger city. Down to the left is Haklania, and across the river is Barwana. And then all the way up at the top, there's a dam. This is the Euphrates River, so cradle of civilization right here. And then there's a hydroelectric dam that created a reservoir up top. So we had control of the hydroelectric dam and used that as a firm base. Our Azerbaijani counterparts manned it for us. And then what our mission was to go in and do what's called a clear-in zone, where we basically went house to house, courtyard by courtyard, and cleared out all 3 of these cities, looking for bad guys and bombs. So the unit we went to go support, 2nd Battalion 3rd Marines, had been chewed up really bad over the first 3 months that they were there. They took a couple dozen killed and over 200 wounded in about 3 months. So they said, who wants a battalion of Marines to come in and help out? And every commander in the region threw their hands up. And so they sent my company, our headquarters element, and our weapons company to this area. And then our boat company and helo company went to Ramadi. So zoom in a little bit more. After we did the clear-in zone, which was our mission, we managed to drop the violence about 85%. So there was just a lot, we lowered the kinetic activity at least pretty significantly. And they said, well, we can't let you go. So you did a good job, and your reward for doing a good job is an extension. So we got extended. And this was actually, at the time, it was referred to as the Surge Campaign. So Al-Anbar Province was the Sunni Triangle, often referred to as the Triangle of Death, was very hot, very kinetic, and they sent a bunch of additional troops in to go clear that out. And so they decided to make us stay, and we set up shop here in Barwana on the east side of the river, kind of on the north end, and we had a few checkpoints. We had our Joker was our call sign, so we set up a fob. We literally rented a house from an Iraqi guy and just sandbagged the crap out of it. And then we had the boat ramp down there to the left. They have since, so these are newer satellite images. At the time, the bridge had been blown out, so we would have people would ferry back and forth on boats there. And then the north ECP, or entrance control point, was to the top of the screen there. And this was kind of our area of operations. We would do daily patrols We would set up posts at these positions. We would check everybody that came in and came out. Again, just kind of, we did what was called SASO, or Security and Stability Operations. These are some images to go with that. So the top left is our fob. Again, that was just a house we rented from an Iraqi guy and just put some posts on top. The big picture to the right is the North ECP. That's looking north, dirt road. We had a machine gun bunker pushed out, and then everybody that would come in would get searched. And then the boat ramp there on the bottom left. So we did that for, we were in country for about 6 months total. Like I said, we were able to lower the violence significantly. Unfortunately, we did lose 3 Marines of our own, Corporal Richie Quill, Sergeant Major Joseph Ellis, and Corporal Jennifer Parcell. Corporal Parcell was attached to us as part of the Lioness female searcher program, and she and Sergeant Major Ellis were both killed in a suicide bomb February 7th, 2007. So that structure right there was blown up by a suicide bomber. But we went there and we did our job, and we managed to, like I said, lower the violence and try to create a better, safer place for the people that live there, and prevent future attacks from state-sponsored terror. That was kind of the reason we were there. So just wanted a kind of high-level overview of what I did in Iraq, at least. This is kind of more context of what it looked like. So the terrain was very, I like to say it's kind of a mix of urban, rural, and ancient. These aqueducts, these are old Roman aqueducts, things that would have plaques on them and be protected by historical societies were just kind of commonplace along the Euphrates River. It was very green and lush along the Euphrates River as well. A lot of people think of Iraq as being hot and sandy. We were there in the wintertime, so it was actually cold. We got snowed on a couple of times. We had a combat cameraman with us, and that was a picture of me on post one day, and that ended up on the DoD website at some point. And then that's just kind of a picture of the town and the city. So, yeah, just a quick overview of that.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was a great overview. And so I want to jump right into the topic of leadership and how those experiences, your experiences, Colonel, shaped you along the way. So I'd like to start out with, do you recall the first time either of you were placed in any form of a type of a leadership position, and what you learned from that early experience? Then we'll get into kind of how that evolved through the years.
Probably the first significant leadership experience I had, my first assignment out of pilot training, I was flying the B-52 bomber, and it's a crew of 6. And of course you have 2 pilots. Well, you start in the right seat of the airplane as a co-pilot, then as you get more experience and such, you move over to the left seat. Well, I remember as a co-pilot, as I got more senior, I kind of thought I knew everything, probably smarter than the guy in the left seat, right? Well, all of a sudden you go through training, and now you are the guy sitting in the left seat, and you're making a lot of decisions, not only on how to fly the airplane, but a big part of what we do is how do you employ the weapon system. And then also, I was responsible for this other crew of 6, which was 5 officers and one enlisted tail gunner. So I quickly learned that number one, I had to have street cred with these guys, right? I had to know my stuff, because they would pick it apart in a hurry, right? What did that knowing my stuff mean? It meant that they trusted me. They knew that whatever happened, whatever situation we got into, I could lead them out of that, correct? And then also a little bit of you're out there on your own. It's the middle of the night, and you're flying low level at 500 feet in the mountains. All of a sudden, there's no experienced person in the left seat to turn to. I knew then I had to be able to accept all input from all the crew members, even though we all think we're good, right? And I had to learn how to communicate. I often say you can't communicate enough, but I wanted those guys to have trust in me, that I knew my stuff, but also if something didn't feel right, they could speak up. So that kind of stuck with me all the way through my leadership positions as I moved along in the Air Force, is building that trust, having that street cred, as I like to call it, but also communication. People would feel free to bring me the good news, the bad news, or what, the good, bad, ugly.
All right, thanks, Nick.
So again, the perspective is pretty different from a junior enlisted standpoint than from an officer standpoint. But at the same time, in the Marine Corps, they teach you even early on in boot camp that if there are two Marines in a room, one of them is in charge, right? One of them is a leader. So you are always in a position to be a leader, and you need to be ready to accept that. And one of the other things they always harped on was that you need to know the job of two people ahead of you, because at any moment in time, you could be thrust into that position. And so one of the first times that I ended up being in a leadership position was, one of the first times I was in a combat situation. So we found ourselves on a rooftop about 5 or 6 days in when we were in Iraq, and that was the first time I got shot at. And then I kind of looked around, and I acquired the target, and I fired a few shots off back myself, and then I realized I'm the senior man here. I've got two other guys, two junior Marines that are on this roof with me, and they don't know what to do. So my job wasn't to pull the trigger at that moment. My job was to get those Marines on target and to get their weapon systems employed and to communicate down to the other Marines in the area and to pass that information on. And so that training kicks in, but then you realize, you're not in charge of just yourself. Your actions are responsible. You are responsible for your actions and the actions of the other guys that are around you, other people that are around you that are under your command. So, and then one of the things, it wasn't a personal experience, a leadership experience of mine, but it was one of those, something that always sticks with me. On our way out, we got on the helicopter to leave when we were leaving our area of operations, and I was sitting in between my team leader and my squad leader, and they were both 22 or 23 years old at the time. The squad leader was in charge of the lives of 13 Marines, and the team leader in charge of 4, not to mention the actions of all of those people. And they just looked at each other and said, "We brought them all home." And there was this physical weight that lifted off of these two young men, that, just the realization that being that young and looking at it now, and many of the faces in this room are that age, or to have that burden of leadership on the shoulders of people, and how it's executed so well is still, looking back on it is fascinating to me. I turned 21 in Iraq. I had my 21st birthday in Iraq. I got to stand 8 hours of post and do 8 hours of patrol, and then I got to have 8 hours of rest on my 21st birthday.
So at 21 years old, he's getting shot at, and all of a sudden he realizes, I'm the man. That's impressive.
Powerful testimony. So both of you were thrust into leadership at younger ages. So with your combat experience and as a junior officer, soon you're put into charge after you get your bars and you move on from there. So I want you to kind of do a snapshot of your career and how your leadership style has progressed and changed throughout the years. Obviously, Colonel, you went through 34 years, became a 06 wing commander in charge of troops, and Nick, you went on to leadership and in the civilian world. So talk to us about how those experiences framed your future leadership.
I was able to, again, I started as junior enlisted. I got out as a sergeant. I had at one point 38 Marines, in a section that I was in charge of, and millions of dollars of government equipment. That was one of the most difficult things to get promoted ahead of your peers, and then to be in charge of them. Because it's middle management, really. You're trying to. These guys were all short timers. They were all ready to get out somewhat soon, and just the little things of get a haircut. Wear clean candy. Come on, that kind of stuff. But also, we have a job to do. We have this, mission to still accomplish, and that struggle of not just being a buddy anymore, and being in charge of people, and balancing that, because they're still your brothers, they're still your friends, but that was an interesting, experience I had, and then transitioning into civilian life, I found myself in college, basically every group project, I didn't ask for it, but I ended up kind of being, blessed that you're now leading this group project. Okay. And it was one of those where I think vets tend to have an air about them. There's a confidence that other people have in them, and then they get tasked with that. Later on in the professional world, learning that speaking to my Marines and getting them to do speaking in a certain way to my Marines motivated them to do their job is not necessarily the way you can speak to a civilian employee. So I had to have a couple of conversations when I was first in charge of civilians about, yelling at them and telling them to shut up and do their damn job isn't necessarily a good leadership tactic in most situations. So it's different. There are a lot of things that you can take away, but there's also kind of the actual execution of it is different. And now with me, it's one of the biggest things that I've taken out of the Marine Corps is we used to say lead, follower, get the hell out of the way, and there's an appropriate time to do each. One is not necessarily better than the other. So if you are in a position to be the leader, that's great. Make sure you do it. But there are times where you can best benefit the mission or the goal by taking the direction of others or just completely getting out of the way so that mission can be accomplished. You don't have to be the leader all the time. But when it is your time, you need to be able to step up and execute.
Piggyback on that, Nick, I totally agree. Everybody thinks a leader is always out front, always leading. Sometimes the best leaders are good followers, right? Taking care of the mission in their own way. So what I would say, details matter. Nick talked a little bit about now he had to get on as he moved up, he had to get on with his peers if their haircut wasn't quite right, or their this wasn't that quite right, or their that. And so I would sometimes get a question like my crew, well, your hat looks a little rough there. Well, why don't we go over to the clothing sales, get you a new hat? Ah, come on, you're all laid up, you're this, you're that. Always reminded them details matter, because there's something that can happen I call it slow motion erosion. And it also speaks to civilian life. We'll talk a little bit about that too. So you let your hat go. Then you let your boots go. Then you let this go. Then all of a sudden, how can I count on you at night when I'm down at 500 feet and we're flying 1 mile stream formation in big airplanes called B-52s and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, if you can't even take care of your hat, you can't even take care of your boots, you can't even take care of your personal matters, right? So I always used to emphasize in a good way that details matter. And it just doesn't matter if it's a good hat that's in good repair or you're flying formation at night in the mountains. You got to take care of details. The other thing is, like Nick said, you can't be too heavy-handed at times. You have to find a good way to handle that. I had a great mentor when I was in college and working, summer jobs and such and full-time jobs to go through school. And this gentleman said, and it always stuck with me, you get things done through people. He says, Doug, you get things done through people. And whether that's a bunch of tough, hard as nails Marines, taking Iwo Jima, or it's a Air Force airman sitting in a air-conditioned comm center, right? You get things done through people. And often I would hear, well, it must be easy to be a leader in the military. You just tell people what to do and where to go and how to do it. Folks, I'm telling you, just like in the private sector, that's not going to last very long. You got to win their hearts and minds. You got to have street cred, all those things I talked about at first. Because then, when the chips are down, or when you're in a situation where everybody's got to react and react quickly, there's no hesitation. There's trust. There's confidence. And so I tried to build that up as kind of my leadership style, always being willing to listen, but also not being afraid to tell people sometimes, I value your input, keep it coming, but this is the direction we're going. Whatever that direction, whether that we were flying or whether we were, I was running a program or I was a commander. This is where we need to go, and this is why we're going to do it. And then I've had some honest conversations, and if this doesn't work for you, thank you for your service. We can facilitate a transfer out of our unit to another one or someplace else you think you'd like to go. And you know what happened? Nobody ever wanted to transfer. Well, sir, I thought this, I thought that. But they came along, they came on board. You see, so you bring people along that way.
Even to kind of piggyback on that again real quick, the decisiveness, I think, and then the trust. So building trust among your team, building a team based on their strengths and putting them in the position to be as effective and impactful as they can based on what they're good at. That's really important as a leader, is to build teams around goals. If you had 5 pilots and no crewmen and no tail gunner, what are you going to do? Like, you're lopsided, right? So the same thing goes in the civilian world, making sure that you have a good team around what you're trying to accomplish, and that you all have trust in each other, and that they have trust in you as the leader. Again, we say, it doesn't matter if you go left or you go right. What matters is you go, and you make that decision, and you stick with it, and you move forward, and the people that you are leading trust you, that you have, you've made the right decision. So that decisiveness and trust are really, really important.
The only other thing I would add, too, from my experience, was that as I moved up the ranks in different leadership positions, and obviously had more people serving under me, I really had to let go of the things, more of the technical stuff. And that was hard for me to do. I was comfortable in what I was doing, and I'd get an opportunity to move up. And then I finally had a commander tell me once, he said, "Doug, here's what you need to know. You can't do this, this, and this anymore. People don't want you doing this, this, and this. Other people get paid to do that. You have to focus more strategically now." And I'm so glad I had that lesson early on, because as I became a wing commander, and as you heard in the bio, you had 2,000 people on an installation. You don't have time to get the nuts and bolts. You have built that trust, confidence, and such. They're giving you good information. Then you use kind of all your tools you develop to make the appropriate decisions on whatever the matter is at hand.
So you're mentioning trust and confidence. How do you inspire, how do you build that trust? It doesn't come overnight. You can't force it, you can't command it. How do you inspire trust in those that are following you?
To what Doug said about you don't have to be the best at everything to be the leader. So Bob Iger is not the best animator at Disney, but he runs Disney pretty well, type of thing. So I think you build trust over time by doing and by demonstrating that you're not going to tell somebody to go do something that you're not willing to do yourself, and you've demonstrated that over, or have done, as much of how I got my peers to do what they needed to do when they didn't want to get their hair cut, or they didn't want to show up on time, or because I wasn't just some guy that came in out of nowhere. I had been through everything that they had been through. I had done everything that they had done, and I had been promoted for a reason. And they understood that. They had that respect for me, and it was just, you do it by doing, I guess. I don't know how to put it
So
better.
modeling it.
Modeling behavior,
what you
yeah,
expect.
definitely modeling behavior. Never, empowering them to make their decisions as well. I mean, particularly as you get higher up, and you have, all of those different people underneath you and all the different, responsibilities. Making sure that the people underneath you know that they have the authority to make decisions as well. You have the trust in them. You've trained them. You know that they know what they're doing, and you trust them to carry out the mission, and that trust is reciprocated.
So this might be a tougher question, but think back through your careers. What's the hardest decision you've had to make, and how did it go? Whether it ended well or did not, but what was the hardest decision you had to make in leadership throughout your careers?
Probably there are a few things that come to mind, Scott, but I recall as I was progressing, I used to say there are two biggest decisions a wing commander makes, and the most important one is their senior enlisted advisor. And that's the most important decision. Understand you've got the officers and enlisted, but the wing commander in the Air Force who's going to be successful has a good, strong senior enlisted advisor, a chief master sergeant, as we call it. And I just recall one of the toughest decisions I had to make was when I went into a wing, and the command chief did not have the respect of any of the enlisted troops, and also was not moving that group forward. Like in the Air Force in particular, the majority of airmen are enlisted, right? So that's why, just one reason why that senior enlisted advisor was so important, because they're bringing back to the commander, or they should be, the pulse of the enlisted force, right? And that commander, to me, should be listening. I wasn't getting that kind of feedback. No one likes to move anybody along, but it gnawed at me for a long time, I'll be honest with you, because it was going to become apparent that this chief was going to be moved on and probably retired early. And so, anyhow, that was probably the toughest decision I had to make, because I valued so much the role of that senior enlisted advisor. And I wanted to make sure then that didn't cause any ripple throughout the enlisted force, but we had to move that person along. And it didn't happen overnight. These things often take time, right? So it was over a period of several months, but we went ahead and did that.
One of the toughest things, I won't dive into specific details on it because it's happened a few times, but as a leader, is knowing when to quit pursuing something, right? So if you're working on an initiative or a program or a project, and this is really more from my civilian side, being able to let go. All right, we had a desire or a goal, and we pursued it, and we got to a point where you're starting to get diminishing returns. You're not actually going to get the return out of this initiative that you want to, even though it's really, really close to your heart, or you're really passionate about it. You're spinning your wheels, you're wasting everybody's time by not doing something else that will be more important and impactful. And so knowing when to let go, when to kill a project maybe, and just move on to the next thing, and understand you've got those sunk costs, you're not getting those back. Let's move on to the next thing and start making progress that way. That's one of the toughest things for me personally, because I get passionate and just really grab onto some of these things sometimes.
Very good. I want to pause here just to give anyone a chance that might have a question for either Mr. Dare or Colonel Schwartz. Alexis? I think we got a mic coming to you.
For both of you, at any time, civilian or enlisted officer, did you ever feel you failed as a leader, and how did you move on from that?
Good question. Who wants to take that first?
Yes, absolutely. I think, there's a Winston Churchill quote that success is not final and failure is not fatal. To really know that it's part of the learning process. In the military, you really try not to, right? Because failure can mean death. Whether your friends die or, God forbid, you accidentally kill somebody who you shouldn't. Those are the biggest two fears I had in the military. But in the civilian world, yeah, absolutely. When you fail, I have really high respect. I don't know if you guys do Clifton Strengths or familiar with that, but Myers-Briggs, DISC, stuff like that. Responsibility is really high on my Clifton Strengths. So I get physically uncomfortable when I do something that causes someone else's job to be harder, right? So if I screw something up, I really dwell on that sometimes. And my advice would be to try not to dwell. It's easy to say, but understand that everybody makes mistakes, and the people who your mistake affected, they've made mistakes too. Do what you can to make it right, to overcome that, and not to do it again. I think that's the other biggest thing, is to learn from the failure, and then also share that wisdom with the next generation or the subordinate that this was the failure I had. Don't be like me. Don't make that mistake in the future. But expect that it's going to happen. Nobody's perfect. You're going to screw up at some point in time, and don't let it tank whatever initiative or project or goal that you're pursuing, and try to learn from it and overcome. Yeah.
Two things come to mind in my career. The first, I flew my last assignment was primarily flying the KC-135 refueling tanker. And if you've ever seen in the news, the new tanker is called the KC-46. It's been plagued with some problems, as all new weapon systems are. We worked very hard at Grissom to get that airplane stationed there. because it brought a whole bunch of what we call military construction money, all kinds of things that would really propel that base to keep it viable for many, many years to come. And we worked hard. My staff worked hard, I worked hard, we worked hard with our congressional delegation, and at the end of the day, we were not selected. And I'm not going to get into, I could talk for a half hour about political implications, but we fell just short. And I don't know why that bothered me so much. I think part of it was I love the people at Grissom and the wing there, and I wanted to see that continue. KC-135 is an older airplane. Someday it'll come out of service, and then what do you do? But, and then I had to kind of pick myself up and dust myself off and say, hey, you did all you could. Because I did a lot of reflection. What did I miss? How could I have done better? But it didn't happen. It was really out of my hands as a wing commander anyhow. And I think the other thing that's on a smaller level, and I think Nick touched on this a little bit, you just can't always yell at people. I'm a pretty easygoing guy. It really takes, honestly, it takes just a lot to get me rattled. But there's a few times I kind of lost my cool. I remember my mission support group commander, and folks, it was over the silliest thing. It was over a staff car. I was getting ready to retire. I wanted to make sure the new commander coming in had a new staff car with all the radios, this, that, and all bells and whistles. And all of a sudden, I literally had about 3 weeks left, and this mission support group commander was also a good friend of mine. And he came in, and I had actually, it's a long story, I talked to contracting about it. I tried to get it all done. And finally he came in and he says, sir, you can't do that. What the hell you mean I can't do that? I want that staff car. And it was not a good conversation. I immediately caught myself, and I think that was probably the lowest I felt in all my command time. Obviously I apologized. I said, let's just reset. I let my emotions get ahead of me, and that's just not me. So anyhow, we kissed and made up, so to speak, but I do recall that on a lower level. So what's the takeaway from all that, folks, is just remember that catch your breath, be willing to listen, and don't immediately lash out.
And you made a good point, Doug. Acknowledge the mistake. Own it. Let that person who you affected know that you made a mistake. That will go a very long way for them to be like, all right, we won't do it again. So don't try and pawn it off. Don't try and bury it. Don't try and hide it. I screwed up. This is how I screwed up, and this is my plan to fix it.
Dean Fincannon?
Thank you. I just want to thank you for some incredible leadership lessons. In 1 hour, you've provided so many rich examples. And I look at Dr. Liebhauser, and he doesn't get much credit, but I'm going to say this, Scott, so just don't listen. But his time in serving in the Air Force, his leadership experience and his insight has carried through and has so richly helped Indiana Tech. He is such a great leader, and we learned from him. And so my question to you would be, what lessons or what leadership skills or habits have you transitioned now from the military now in your everyday life, and has that been a challenge for you? Because we all don't necessarily accept leadership that well in the normal sphere of everything.
A lot of the lessons that I carried with me out of the military, and it took me a while to reflect on it and really kind of realize what they were sometimes, but I don't know that they were necessarily leadership specific, or more just kind of skills, mindsets, kind of principles to follow. And one of them is, we had signs all over Iraq. Everywhere you had kind of the wire, the gate, where you were going to leave the safe area, there were signs that said "complacency kills," and I think that really translates well into the business world and civilian life. And in the Marines, that was legit. I mean, people will die if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. But in business, I think it's the same way. If you are swimming along and everything's going great, and operations are smooth, and you're resting on your laurels, what happens when, I don't know, a global pandemic hits and the economy tanks and all of this stuff that you didn't expect is going to happen if you don't have reserves, or you don't have a plan to develop, or you don't have a strategy to grow or innovate, then that complacency is going to kill your business. It's going to kill, or at least set you back. So Complacency kills is something that that rings in my ears all the time. Being flexible, we would say, improvise, adapt, and overcome. Or in the Marine Corps, we'd say semper gumby, always flexible. We plan everything. In the Marines, we had this saying, the 7 Ps, the proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. So have a plan, be ready to execute that plan, and then the moment the bullets start flying, prepare to throw that plan out the door and adapt. I think the same thing goes with business as well. You should have a strategic plan. You should have tactical steps along the way. You should have goals. But guess what? It's not going to go to plan. So don't quit and throw up your hands and run away when things don't go to plan. Be ready to adapt. So those are a lot of the things that, some of the things that I took away, which is kind of these things that at the time, as a junior enlisted, Marine, I kind of just thought this is a very Marine Corps thing. This is a very military thing. But those lessons really translate well into any number of scenarios, whether it's school or professional life.
So real quick, if you take nothing else away today, take Semper Gumby. Okay, so always look up Gumby if you need to, students, but add this to your leadership arsenal, Semper Gumby, always flexible.
So, by the way, thank you. Dr. Liebhauser here, a very humble guy, very humble leader, correct? There's an organization called Starbase. There's one out at the Fort Wayne International Guard Base. There's one at Battle Creek. And you helped me with this, Scott, but you were the person who developed all those Starbases, correct? In Indiana. So, and what is Starbase? It's a program that generally 4th, 5th, 6th graders go to the base and learn about aviation, the Air Force a little bit, rockets, all kinds of things. When I was an interim principal down here at St. Paul's, our 5th graders went out to Starbase, and I was just amazed at the program. And that's all because of this guy. Every Starbase in Indiana, Dr. Liebhauser, so hats off to you. So, Semper Gumby, or I don't know, whatever that's, who cares? No. Air Force, flexibility is the key to air power. Is there a theme though, right? Flexibility. So I've learned you have to be flexible. And to echo what Scott said about, kind of like don't die on your sword. I have they used to call them Schwartzisms, but I have this, a bunch of silly little stuff, not my first rodeo, blah, blah, blah. But the most important, I've got about 100 tongue piercings. Now, what do I mean by that? Is I bit my tongue many times when I had to catch myself. Come on, Doug, just hang on, let's gather the facts. So I joke that I bite my tongue and not say something that I would regret later, okay? So part of that is being flexible, knowing when, this isn't working, don't be afraid to go and try something different. I have a quick football analogy. You got 4 downs in football. If you go off right guard on the first play and you get about a yard, then you go off left tackle on the second play. By the time 3rd down rolls around, let's figure something else out. Let's go end around to get that 1st down. And I found that to be the case. It's a simplistic example, I know, but I found that to be kind of the case of what I had to do sometimes to get things moving and get people redirected, so to speak. I was always impressed by the power of young airmen. Like the Nick Darras in the Marines, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, what they could do. Just let them run and just let them go. Just tell them what you want, here's the objective, and they're going to make it happen. So I think as we talk about how I went along, I learned that more and more and more as I went along, empower people. The great one, Ronald Reagan always said, trust but verify, though, and we did, but boy, they never disappointed.
Thank you. Other questions? We've got one over here.
So I have a question on taking criticism as a leader. So if you ever receive anything that's like helpful criticism and unhelpful criticism out there, how should we go about receiving both of those?
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk about the first. It would be like me to a subordinate. What if I said, you know what, you are the worst pilot on the planet. You can't land this airplane. How are you going to feel? Not very good. How about if I say as an instructor pilot, what I want you to do, we're going to do some landings here because you don't seem comfortable, and we're going to get this figured out. If we have to do 15 touch and go landings, we're going to make sure you're comfortable and you're able to land the airplane safely and without pranging it on the runway. There's a difference there, right? It's how you manage those conversations. And you could take that in any other walk in life. If you're putting somebody down, you're making them feel bad, they're not going to perform for you. Yeah, we've got some things to work on. We'll get there, though. We'll get there. And that's what you have to do. Now, as far as taking criticism, it's always hard for all of us to take criticism, right? But you know what? I used to tell people, bring it on. The only way I and our organization are going to get better is if we have good conversation. Now, we're not going to throw long-range missiles, from the back of the room. That's not productive. If somebody has something to say, you know how it is, you're in a briefing room or a room like this, and there's people chuckling in the back, and they're smarter than everybody on the planet. Those are the folks I say, you got a question? How can I help you? That's what you have to bring it out of people, too, and make sure that everybody's on board, but everybody understands where you're going, but also that there's room for criticism and opportunity to improve.
Yeah, and I think on taking criticism, be open-minded. Particularly, it's easier when you have trust in that leader that's giving you the criticism, or if you are a leader and you have trust in that subordinate, who, that's a big deal if they feel comfortable enough with you to come to you, and as long as they're doing it in a respectful and productive manner, receiving criticism, try to be as open-minded as possible. You're not always going to get good criticism. You're going to get bad criticism sometimes too. So that's, you can't dwell on that either. I used to say, whenever we call it getting your ass chewed, whenever you get yelled at, get an ass chewing. It's not my first, it's not my last, and it's not my worst. It's going to happen again. Somebody's going to yell at me at some point. And they may be right. Maybe I screwed up. Maybe I completely deserve that. I'm going to try not to do that again because I didn't like getting my ass chewed. Or, this guy's an idiot. Okay, I took it, I'm going to move on, and I'm going to continue to perform in an exemplary way. And it's a judgment call, but there are too many people who get good criticism and then blow it off. And that would be what I would caution against, is really if someone's coming at you and saying you did something wrong, or you could have done this better, or this is a way that I would, approach it next time, think about it, and really kind of take a beat, because some people get defensive really quick and they put shields up and they want to make excuses and they want to, react or even attack and criticize the person who criticized them. Take your breath, take your moment, and really reflect on it.
I have a quick thing to add. So I was a wing commander in Florida and then up here in Indiana. My boss was actually a general officer out in California. And so I had an anecdotal conversation one day, and Colonel Schwartz, who do you report to, or what do you do? I said, my boss is General Flournoy, and he's out in California. Oh, that's great. He's way out in California. He doesn't know what you're doing. Really? Get your ass chewed by a general officer sometime. At times, it doesn't happen very often, but you better have your answers. You better be ready. But so my point in that, everybody reports to somebody, and so we're going to, hopefully bring our folks along, but also be willing, and as Nick suggested here, we just got to be open to criticism. With the overarching idea, concept, we're all going to get better because of it.
So let me build on that a little bit as a follower. We'll switch gears. So you talked about your general and leaders you've had over you. You see your leader making bad decisions, perhaps blind spots. Obviously, it would not be easy to tell a general officer, sir, this is really bad, you screwed up, or you probably are going in the wrong direction. I'd like to know from each of you how you properly handle that. So if you've got a leader making bad decisions, how do you go about helping them get there without perhaps being disrespectful?
That's a great question, and hopefully this will help you folks in your march through your careers. So this same general and I actually were peers, and we flew B-52s together. Now, he ended up being a two-star general, and I'm a colonel, but that's hiring right. That's kind of a joke between us. But he was my boss, and I fully respected that. But I also felt that we knew each other well enough, and I had enough street cred with him that when I brought something, it wasn't I just woke up one morning, as I like to say, over toast and coffee and said, I think I'm going to ping the boss, and this is a great idea. It's best idea since sliced bread. No, obviously I didn't do that. I will give you a quick example that illustrates how sometimes you have to work around these things. When a few minutes ago, I mentioned the most important decision a wing commander makes is their their senior enlisted advisor, their chief master sergeant. Second most important selection they make is their vice commander or their number 2 person. So when I returned to Grissom, and this is my 2 other wings I was at too as commander, but particularly at Grissom, there was a lot of problems with morale. Some things were not going the way they should. And so I looked around and I just gave myself about 30 days to get the feel for the morale, and I had a lot of experience with the wing and the base, and I knew the kind of vice commander I needed. And I knew who I needed to get, somebody I'd served with in Florida. But my boss, General Flournoy, had a much different idea about who that vice commander should be. So I said, I've got the person, it's Colonel Paul Gates. Doug, I want you to interview, I was Snuffy Smith, I forget the guy's name now, for that position. I'll tell you, my head was ready to explode, folks. Wait a minute. I'm the commander here and I get to pick my deputy. But I didn't do that. Okay, boss, I'll go ahead and do that. So anyhow, I call this guy up and we have an interview, and it's one of those where I felt like he's interviewing me more than I was interviewing him. And finally I asked him, do you want to come to Grissom? Do you want to be the vice commander here? He was currently stationed in St. Louis or bigger city. If you know where Grissom's at, it's about 40 minutes north of Kokomo and about 45 to an hour southwest of here. It's out in the middle of a cornfield. I said, do you really want to come here? Do you understand the challenges? Well, yeah, I think so. I'm telling you, folks, that was not good enough for Doug Schwartz because our people, our airmen, deserve better. So I called the boss back and I said, I finally got an opportunity to interview Colonel Snuffy Smith. And boss, I'm telling you, this is not the right person for this wing. We'd had a couple other conversations. I said, here's why. Here's what we need. We need support. We call it outside the wire, outside the gate with our community partners. We needed support and morale inside the gate, inside the wire with all our airmen and tenant units. And I said, this guy isn't going to do it. He's not going to get it done. It's like he's doing us a favor to come to Grissom. I said, that's why I think Paul Gates is the right person for this job. We need Paul and his wife, Ann. They came as a couple. They're great community ambassadors, wonderful people. And finally he says, you know what? He says, okay, I got it. Go ahead and hire Paul. Now that didn't happen in one conversation, folks. That happened in a series of conversations over a few weeks, but we got her done.
And I think what you really want to do, if you're going to give criticism if you're going to give it up, you should always, if you're going to complain, you should always complain up, for one. Leaders don't complain down. You don't complain to your subordinates. But if you're going to provide criticism or pushback to a superior, don't just tell them what the problem is. Come to them with a solution. So if you have, right, so Doug had that story kind of illustrated it. He had, okay, I'm going to go, I'm going to do what I'm told, I'm going to talk to this guy, and then I'm going to say, okay, this isn't the right call, but this one is. So that's, if all you're doing is coming up and saying, we tried that, that's not going to work. Nope, that's dumb. You're not going to get a whole lot of positive feedback, and you're not going to get anywhere. What are you trying to accomplish? How do you get there? And that's really that's what you should be trying to achieve.
Well, I want to thank you both, but before we wrap up, I didn't prepare you for this, but I do have some rapid fire questions if you're ready. Ready to have some fun here? Okay, so just whatever first comes to mind. We won't make this too tough for you, but
Extra credit, Professor.
You bet, you bet. Your favorite 80s band?
80s?
Journey.
70s, 60s? Yeah. Journey. I'm going to see Journey next year, so I'm looking forward to it.
I don't know, it's Jefferson Starship.
Well, those 70s?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Hey, stop laughing, I'm dating myself.
If your house is on fire, what 2 non-living things would you run back in to get?
My aeronautical order, and, oh gosh, something that can't be replaced, right? Yeah, probably, that's the first thing that comes to mind, yeah.
Yeah, probably some sort of photos, pictures that aren't digital anymore.
Okay. What job would you be absolutely horrible at?
Teaching.
I was going to say a early childhood teacher.
Man.
That's based on my experience as a principal.
Yeah, both of my parents were public school teachers, and people used to ask, "Are you going to be a teacher too?" I'm like, God, no. I said, "No, that's fine."
Your favorite book?
Yeah, I like historical nonfiction, and so there's I guess the most recent book that I liked was, and now I'm drawing a blank on it.
While you're thinking, there's a book on a famous fighter pilot from Vietnam era, Robin Olds. That's one of my favorite, like, military type books. But yeah, but other books that, you know, I like a lot of nonfiction.
Founding Principles is what it was called. So
Okay.
it was on the.
When I dance, I look like,
Terrible.
Yeah, it's not great.
Like the size 13 and 14 feet that I have, you can draw that conclusion.
world's greatest leader, dead or alive.
Well, as a Christian, obviously Jesus Christ always comes to mind for me. But you know, when you look at other leaders and people, yeah, you know, and we could all talk about it. I'm a great fan of Ronald Reagan. I'm a great fan of those kind of people. But I also had probably the greatest influence in my life was a guy named, ended up being a general, but General Jim Malin. I worked for him as a younger officer, and oh my gosh, I was a sponge. I took nuggets from that guy every day.
Personal experience, his name's Sergeant John Zhang. He was one of those NCOs that just modeled behavior, and really, you can learn a lot from leaders, by bad leaders and by good leaders. He was one of those. But kind of historical figure, or not really historical, but General Mattis. Chaos, Call Sign Chaos is another book that you should read. It was an excellent leadership book.
And finally, boxers or Labradors, your favorite dog breed?
I got to go Labs.
Yeah, I like boxers. We have a Saint Bernard and a Mastiff though, so I like the big dogs.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so what I like to do when I wrap this up anyhow, each year, and I thank you so much for the opportunity to come and speak, Gary and Scott and Nick. It's always great to talk about these things. Brings back a lot of great memories and some tough times for me. And also, you know, nothing's a bed of roses. But, okay, here's 3 things I want you to take. If you got a pencil and paper, I didn't get them on a slide. There's 3 videos I want you to watch. All right, listen up. The first one is General Mark Welch, his speech at the Air Force Academy in November of 2011. Now, what's special about that? It's about 55 minutes long, and Doug, not 55 minutes. Yeah, well, and it's a lot of military, it's a little bit academy, but I'm telling you what, folks, there are nuggets you can pull out of that video that will stick with you for a life. As a leader, sometimes when I get, and I'm telling you, it's not all, again, a cakewalk. There are times at 10:30 at night, and one more thing come up or one more disciplinary problem. I would pull that video out, and I would watch it to make sure, we call it in the Air Force, I'd repage my gyros. That helped me. The other one I want you to watch, Admiral McCraven. Bill McCraven was the, if you know, he was the commander of Special Operations Command, Navy SEAL, 4-star Navy SEAL, and his commencement address at the University of Texas in 2014. General Welch, 2011, AFA, 2014, Admiral McCraven to the University of Texas. And a final one, believe it or not, Stephen Jobs, remember the late founder of Apple? He has about a 9-minute video that was his commencement address at Stanford University. And I would actually watch that too, just to kind of keep a focus. And he always said, stay hungry. And there's some other part of that too that I always like to remember. And I thought that was very appropriate. Also, my email, if you're interested, djschwartz01@gmail.com. DJ, SCHWARTZ, the number 01@gmail.com. If you do find yourself watching any of those videos, and if it turns out it was a waste of your time, you email me. I'll meet you out here and buy you a cup of coffee. Deal? Or email me if you have some other thoughts on it. Thank you very much.
And if you didn't catch all that, just come and see me. I'll get it to you. So, all right, Dr. Roteseiler.
Okay, thank you. So to conclude, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I would especially like to say thank you to our panelists. We are so grateful for your willingness to share your experiences with us today, and please accept these gifts of our gratitude. Thank you. Thank you all so much for attending. Have a great afternoon.